Good evening, everybody. We have a Q&A session tonight, so the first question.
Does enjoying sensual pleasures, like going for holidays, indulging in nice food, or watching movies, etc., reduce our merits? And secondly, does practicing anapanasati increase our merits, even for non-Buddhists who practice breathing meditation?
Well, every night, if you've been joining us on the live stream, you'll be aware many of the chants that we do are called reflections. And the cultivation of this ability to reflect wisely and pay attention to what we do in life, through body, speech and mind, whatever we're doing, thinking, saying, is something that's vital to our practice, to learn how to wisely reflect, assess, learn from our behavior. One of the first teachings the Buddha gave to his son, Rahula, was how to reflect on the kind of actions and the consequences of his actions. The kind of actions we make, meaning reflect on the intention behind one's actions, before, during and after. So before you do anything, think it through. Is this going to be good for me? If I'm going to say something, is this going to be beneficial for me or for others? Or even just our thoughts, to think about the benefit for oneself and others, or the opposite, to think, will this be harmful for myself or others? So the Buddha encouraged his son Rahula to learn this skill of wise reflection from the age of 7, just reflecting, before, during, after. Was this good? Did it bring me some benefit? Did it bring me trouble or harm or suffering? Was it good for others? Or did it bring some trouble, suffering to others? That's how he taught his son, and very much it's the heart of the Buddhist practice, especially in the beginning as we're learning to follow the teachings, is learning to develop this ability to wisely reflect on what we're doing. So it's a bit hard to say in the abstract, you should go on holidays or you should never go on holidays. You should relax with some good food or not. It's more of an ongoing reflection through your life. And of course, there are dangers in things. Sensual pleasures are dangerous for us in the sense that they're addictive. We can become, we say, intoxicated with them, and they can lead on to many more heedless states of mind. So, that sense of one thing leading to another. Maybe you've worked very hard or studied hard, and then you decide it's time to relax and go on holiday. Well, that may be actually quite a good thing to do, but how you spend your time on your holiday, there's some danger there, isn't there? There's possible problems, because you go on a holiday and you might lose all sense of carefulness and become quite heedless or careless in your behavior, and drink or eat too much or indulge too much in certain activities, to the point where your mind just becomes very unpeaceful, disturbed in whatever way. And we probably all experience that. We know what sensual indulgence is like. When we have too much good food, we become too obsessed or addicted to certain sense pleasures. So nowadays with technology, maybe you want to relax and play a computer game But you thought you would relax for an hour, but it goes to 2 or 3 or 4. You might become completely addicted. That's the danger with sense pleasure. It's fascinating, enticing, addictive. So you have to learn to reflect on your actions and the results of your actions. So if you're finding your level of mindfulness and wisdom is dropping, your practice of sila is dropping because of sensual pleasure, sensual indulgence, then that's a warning that maybe you're going in the wrong direction in your life. Even if you're tired and you need to relax, okay, that we understand. But you also have to find skillful ways to relax and know your limits, know what we call moderation, and reflect on the results of what you're doing. And whether it's becoming an obstacle to your practice. If you're somebody who meditates regularly, you'll probably find too many sensual pleasures become quite distracting, disturbing to the mind. So you do want to practice moderation. And people who meditate tend to, they still might go on a holiday, but they do things that don't disturb their mind too much and don't create too many hindrances or obstacles to their meditation. And the Buddha himself, he left the lay life because he said he was just swamped, overwhelmed by sensuality. And that's the danger of it. You're constantly surrounded by entertainment, good food, comfortable furniture and clothing and beautiful people. Sounds good, but it becomes very addictive to the mind, and then you have to work hard to pull your mind back from that. So to learn moderation and to reflect on what you're doing, whether it's really conducive to your practice or harmful to your practice. They say the way the Arya Pugala, the noble ones, relax is they enter samadhi. They call it vihara dhamma. It's like a dwelling place for the mind. So just relaxing or taking a rest in itself is not wrong in the practice. It may be actually quite helpful because sometimes we need to rest so that we can continue to practice and do good things. But find skillful ways to do it. So the Arya Pugala, they rest in samadhi. They sit meditation and enter a state of samadhi and refresh body and mind. So that's something to aspire to, and so again, it's a reflection. What is a healthy, non-obstructive way to relax, and what are the more dangerous and harmful ways to relax that probably don't make you relax at all, do they? I can remember when I was young, going on holidays, you drink too much, you do things in excess, and then you come home and you're not feeling in a very good state of mind. So something to reflect on. As far as the practice of anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing goes, well, this is a very beneficial thing to do, brings great benefit to the one practicing and to the people they live with and interact with, because if you practice mindfulness of breathing regularly, you become more mindful aware. Generally, you gain more inner peace, body and mind, more clarity and mindfulness, more clear comprehension. And again, your ability to reflect on the truth, see the truth and understand things improves. So in particular, it's a practice developed for understanding suffering, its causes, and then to remedy your suffering by letting it go. And often just practicing mindfulness of breathing will very quickly help you let go of a state of stress or worry or anger or all greed and desire, simply by putting your mind, your attention on something very neutral and very calming, but maintaining clarity of mind as you do that. So probably many meditators have found they've had a strong emotional reaction to something, they're very upset or stressed, but then they go off and they do some mindfulness of breathing, and quite quickly their body calms down and mind calms down. So it's a very useful thing to do. And it's something you can use. You don't have to be Buddhist to practice mindfulness of breathing. And nowadays we know all around the world people are interested in meditation, and they are not all Buddhist. My first taste of Buddhist meditation was learning to practice mindfulness of breathing, and that was when I was a teenager, and I didn't yet call myself a Buddhist. I was just beginning. And many, many people are like this. They have an interest in Buddhist practices, they've heard some good things, they've read some good things, but they might not consider themselves a Buddhist yet, but they want to try it out. And nearly always they find benefit, especially if you have a good teacher and you incorporate your practice of mindfulness of breathing with other aspects of the Buddhist path. You'll find it's very effective. It's an effective way to train the mind on a daily basis. And as the Buddha said, it can be the vehicle, the means by which you reach full enlightenment, can fully purify your mind from all greed, anger, delusion, the causes of suffering. You can remove them completely through developing this practice of mindfulness of breathing. So whether you're Buddhist or not Buddhist, you can definitely benefit from it, and I'd recommend people to try it.
How do we overcome the fear of uncertainty? For example, going for a job and wanting that job and unsure whether we will get the job. Should we just do the best we can and leave the rest to karma? Accept that this is life and just keep following the precepts and doing good? Thank you, Ajahn.
It's a big issue, especially nowadays with so many people losing their job or finding it hard to get work. So one quick solution: if you can't get your job, just come and live in the monastery. Always need more monks, nuns, lay practitioners in the world, so that's one occupation that you'll never find is full. And some people have become a monk or a nun because they couldn't get a job, and they got fed up trying to get one, so then they decided that's it, giving up with the normal pursuit of a career in that way and join the Sangha. But like with anything, whether it's looking for a job or applying for a job or waiting for a job interview or going for the interview, or you're trying to get a loan from the bank or trying to pass an exam, of course, before you've done it, you don't yet know the outcome. And again, you have to accept that fact. If you're going for a job interview or applying for a job, of course, your aim is you want that job so that you can earn a living and get on. Maybe there's other people you have to look after as well. So that's clear. What your goal is clear. But the Buddha encouraged us to reflect on our situation regularly and accept that there are always many factors involved in everything we do and everything that happens in our life. So the main factor is your intention. I want to get this job, I'm applying for this job. But then there'll be certain factors to do with your own character and karma. Am I a suitable candidate for this job? What skills do I have? And then another factor might be how many other people are applying. So sometimes people come here and they say, oh, I'm applying for a job and there's 1,500 other candidates. I think the record was somebody from another country applied for a job with 5,000 people all applying for one position. So in a situation like that, you don't build up too many hopes. Doesn't mean to say you won't get it, because somebody has to get the job, but you also have to be aware that the chances are quite small. So there's all these external factors, your skills, what you offer to that company, what they're looking for, the other people applying, so many different factors. And you have to accept that. So like you say, you do the best you can on the day of the interview or filling in your forms, whatever. You do the best you can. You have your goal, but at the same time, you always have to remember it's not sure. It would be foolish if you assume I've got the job, it's in the bag. Occasionally that might be the case if you've got someone in the company who's rooting for you or something. Well, maybe you have got the job in the bag, but often it's not the case, and so you have to allow for that in your thinking. You want the job, but you also can accept, if I don't get the job, this isn't the end of the world, and maybe there are other jobs to apply for, so that you don't get too upset or disappointed if you don't get the job. So it's like that in many things in life, isn't it? You have your goals, you make your choices, there's things you intend to do, but you have to accept the uncertainty of life as well, and that there are many factors, sometimes things that you don't know about, determining what will the outcome be. And as long as you can reflect on that and accept the uncertainties of life, then of course you carry on, you do what you want to do, you apply, and like you say, you do your best, and at the end it is really your karma, isn't it? It's your good fortune, and some people have a lot of good fortune, a store of good fortune, and things seem to go well for them. Others, things don't go so well, but it can vary. And life is about accepting failure and disappointment as much as success, because nobody just gets success. And many of the people in life who do find success have found it because they've learned how to deal with disappointment and failure and go through it and move on and get beyond it. So if you can reflect in this way, that helps take some of the stress out of the waiting and the not knowing before you get the job. As I said, if all fails, then come and live in the monastery.
Next question. Recently, as I meditate, I become aware that there is the mind which is focusing on the breath, and also the knowing presence that is aware of the mind calming down. May I ask if these are two separate conditions, or is it simply the same source, the mind?
Well, we only have the one mind. That's the one thing we know. This mind knows things. But of course there's many objects that the mind can know, but not all at the same time. It's in succession. So we can see, we can hear, we can sense the body, we can sense the mind itself. And as we're meditating, we're becoming much more sensitive to our own mind, because we're using the meditation as a way to develop more continuity of mindfulness and clear comprehension. And as you're developing this continuity of mindfulness, it's like you're becoming more aware of different aspects of your experience, both physical sensations and mental activity. So sometimes it seems a bit like you're kind of peeling off layers of the mind or your experience, what your mind knows, and it almost seems like you might have two minds, one mind looking back at itself, or when the mindfulness improves, there's this sense of the knower and the thing that is known. So it could be, say, like in the example of, say, having a painful feeling as you meditate. You might have some pain in your leg, but as mindfulness becomes more strong, more continuous, you might have this sense of, well, there's the mind that's aware, which is kind of neutral or detached, and then there's the painful feeling, which is there, but it's like there's a separation there. So it can almost seem like your mind splits in two. But really, of course, it's not splitting in two, that would be impossible. But because it's aware of different things and often new things or things that it wasn't previously aware of or that you didn't notice before, it can seem like the mind is sort of working on different levels. And as you meditate, if you meditate regularly, well, you'll find, some days your mindfulness is very strong, continuous, and you can experience very refined states of awareness, samadhi, and all your mental activity seems to disperse and disappear, and there's just this quality of the knowing left. And then other days, nothing. Your mind is all over the place, jumping from thought to thought, feeling to memory to thought, back and forth, all over the place. And it's very frustrating and disappointing and sometimes even a little bit tiring, kind of following this mind that just won't settle down. And then you get every kind of experience in between that. So we have a whole range of experiences we're learning to deal with, be patient with, and be mindful of. And that is the key. The more effort we put into developing mindfulness, and we tend to use our meditation object as the best way to do this. So, mindful of the breath, for example, you learn to maintain that steadiness of mindful awareness kind of in the middle of your experience. Even in the midst of a mental state that is very disturbing, strong emotional reaction to something where you have strong feeling, emotion, a lot of thoughts very fast, or complex trains of thought coming up in a very fast, continuous way. But as you're practicing mindfulness more and more, maybe you also become more aware in the midst of all that there's still this knowing, this quality of knowing, and that sometimes comes to the fore, even in the midst of a very powerful emotional reaction to something. You're very upset or very sad or very angry. Then there's that part of the mind where there is some mindfulness. It comes up maybe only for a while, but at that time there's this sense of detached awareness, which is peaceful. So it's like the peace in the midst of the disturbance. And the more you practice, the more you're aware of that, and the more you can maybe go to that space, so that it seems like you can be mindful of the mind that is not peaceful, mindful of the mind that is peaceful, which sounds strange, but it kind of feels like that the more you practice. And then you also tend to have more confidence in your practice, and you trust in your practice of mindfulness. And you might realize, well, that's your real reference point or refuge in your meditation. You're going to that point of mindful awareness where the mind is detached, we say equanimous, knowing, but not getting caught up into all the stuff coming up and not adding to it. The mind of mindfulness is aware, and it can function very well. Wisdom can function when you're mindful. You can reflect on what's going on. You can teach yourself to let something go, put it down, not get caught up into it. So, for example, say somebody says something that you don't agree with, they have a different view on something, or they may insult you or hurt your feelings. And then you're practicing mindfulness and all those memories come up of what they said. Maybe you have some emotional reaction, some anger, or pain in your mind comes up. But if you can establish mindfulness, using the breath meditation, for example, at that moment, when all the emotion is coming up and the trains of thought are coming up and the memories are coming up, you'll manage to hold on or stay with the breath for a while, then you can have that reflection that even though what you're experiencing is suffering, it's pain, you're no longer adding to it. You're just accepting this is the karmic reaction of whatever has happened. Somebody has said something, you've reacted with anger or feelings of being hurt. But now you're just observing with mindfulness and seeing that is the resultant karma of that situation. That person said those things. But now those things, that mood, the way of thinking, the emotion has come up, but you're not engaging with it, adding on to it, giving it a lot of importance in your mind. You're just watching it. And you'll find that it passes away very quickly when you do that. And the actual experience of suffering can end quite quickly when you're mindful. And if you're suffering endlessly and really suffering and you're wondering what can I do about this, well, ask yourself, it must mean my mindfulness is not very strong at the moment. So then you start looking for a way to bring your mind back to the presence of mind that comes with mindfulness. If you're suffering, you're obviously not letting go. Your mindfulness is weak, your wisdom faculty is not functioning. When mindfulness is there, wisdom can function, you can reflect wisely what's going on, and you can let go. So the more you practice, the more you learn this. And you learn there are many, as Ajahn Chah used to say, when you practice meditation and develop the mind, it's like being in the forest with this still forest pool. When your mind is still and quiet, you may still have all kinds of old karma coming up, old memories, feelings, thought processes coming up, and some of them are suffering, but some of them are very beautiful, some of them are very ugly. But now you're just watching, and it's like this person with the still forest pool, just watching, and all kinds of animals and creatures come there to drink or bathe or pass by, and you're just observing. You're not really getting caught up with them. And the more quiet the mind is, the more mindfulness is present, all kinds of things are revealed. The ability to know your state of mind is there, and you can see all kinds of more refined, peaceful states of mind, experience them. You can let go of the states of stress and suffering better, and this is what leads your meditation on. But it's all the one mind. We don't have two minds or three minds, but we do have changing experiences with the mind. So you might have mindfulness one moment, and then you lose it, then you get back again, and you have one feeling arise, and then a different feeling arise. So it seems almost like many minds, but it's just this one mind, a stream of consciousness, you could say.
Dear Luang Por, at the end of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Venerable Kondanya understood, everything that has a beginning has an end. What does this mean? What are the conditions that lead to this understanding?
Well, you probably have read or heard the Dhammacakka Sutta. If you haven't, you can always read it in our chanting book. We have it there with translation. And you'll see it's a summary of the heart of the Buddhist practice, really. Is the Buddha was just pointing out the ineffectiveness of following a way of sensuality, just trying to find as much sensual happiness as you can and keep it, hold on to it, indulge in it, doesn't bring lasting happiness, actually brings more suffering. And then also pointing out the ineffectiveness of what we call self-deprivation, practices where we're just hurting ourselves physically or mentally, bringing a lot of pain and difficulty to ourselves. And these practices were quite common in India when the Buddha was teaching. So like fasting, going without sleep, going naked, all kinds of practices that meditators did. These don't work either to develop full liberation of mind. So the Buddha started with that, and then he went on to explain the Four Noble Truths, and particularly the Eightfold Noble Path. And listening to the Buddha's words, following his wisdom as he explained the Four Noble Truths, there were the 5 ascetics, his first 5 disciples, who clearly had built up many very good qualities previously. They were ready to hear the Dhamma, and that's why they have the great merit of being the Buddha's first disciples. So they already had developed the practice of sila and samadhi and wisdom to a certain level, although they weren't enlightened yet. So their minds were very ready. They were mindful, they were reflective, their minds were seeking liberation from suffering, so they listened intently to the Buddha. And Venerable Kondanya, one of the 5, was the first to, we say, have his Dhamma eye opened, meaning the inner eye of wisdom, clear knowledge and vision of the way things are. And that clear knowledge and vision arises out of the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path. So that practice of the Eightfold Noble Path came to perfection during the listening to the Dhammacakka Sutta. All the factors have been practiced before, but never quite gelled. They didn't all come together in anyone's mind yet. But now the Buddha explaining the Four Noble Truths was the trigger for Venerable Kondanya. Everything gelled together. And, literally he said, light arose, vision arose, knowledge arose, knowledge and understanding of the Four Noble Truths. What is dukkha? What is suffering? What is its cause? The realization of the end of suffering and the practice that leads to the end of suffering. There's that clarity, and with that clarity, if you know something in your mind is causing you suffering, you let it go, you abandon it. So the causes of suffering were abandoned for him, at least on one level. He became a stream enterer, and that insight into the impermanent nature of what we say sankharas, conditioned things or formations, is what gave him his first glimpse of Nibbana. It wasn't yet Nibbana, but it was a glimpse of Nibbana, what we call the fruits of stream entry, where he's had a clear insight into the impermanent nature of his own body and mind, what we call the 5 khandhas. In brief, just knowing that, this world, the things of the world, human beings, material things, everything are impermanent things. This body is impermanent, so it's that clear knowledge and understanding this body is impermanent, it's changing, one day it must die, for sure, no doubt about that. And then that insight, feeds on to seeing the nature of other people are the same, the material things of this world, everything of this world is made up of, or has arisen through causes and conditions, and those causes and conditions are subject to change. So whatever arises must pass away. So there's that clear insight, and that's a liberating insight for the mind, breaks through what we call Sakkaya Ditthi, this self-identity view where we take everything and view everything as self or belonging to a self, me, mine, myself, me, you, us, them. That's the normal way human beings view their experience. It's all about me, and that's why we suffer so much. When you're mindful, you'll notice when you're mindful and reflective on, particularly on the impermanence of things, well, that sense of self disappears, doesn't it? And the sense of suffering fades, at least temporarily, because of mindfulness and insight. If you're suffering, there's no mindfulness and insight. it's gone. The sense of self is strong when you're suffering. When mindfulness and insight arises, the sense of self disappears, and the mind is just knowing things as they are. And knowing things as they are, or seeing things as they are, is seeing the arising and passing away of physical and mental phenomena. So we can all, in one sense, we can all be very grateful to Venerable Kondanya. Venerable Kondanya was the first to kind of prove or verify that the Buddha's teachings work for human beings to change their view from a deluded, mistaken view of the world, which leads to suffering, to a correct view, which leads out of suffering. So he's like the first person to prove that the Buddha was right, and started the ball rolling. The Buddha started the ball rolling with the wheel rolling with the Dhammacakka Sutta, teaching that. Venerable Kondanya started the wheel rolling in the sense of he was the first to benefit fully from those teachings, and his mind completely changed in an irrevocable way. So it's like a mental revolution. The mind changes and never goes back to its old deluded way of thinking. So a very special experience for him. And very quickly, within a week or two after that, they say the other 4 ascetics also had the same insight, and then very quickly they all became fully enlightened. So they all verified that the path that the Buddha was teaching does work for human beings to move from this state of deluded, unenlightened states of mind that still are mixed up with suffering, to a state of complete liberation, freedom from suffering, which is what we all want. So we can all be very grateful to Venerable Kondanya, the first.
Our last question this evening. Namaskar Paul. We should have a positive mind and attitude towards things and situations. But if we are being positive blindly, such as just being positive but not taking actions to change or improve the situation, that is toxic positivity. As a Buddhist, how can we be positive without being toxic positivity?
Well, I guess through our practice we learn how to look after our minds and to respond to the experiences we have, the situations we get into, in a way that is not going to increase our suffering or the suffering of others. So that doesn't mean to say positive thinking has no place in Buddhism. But like you say, it can become toxic if it becomes like something you just do without thinking about it, or just pin all your hopes on your positive thinking and think that will get you out of things, because it doesn't always work. It can become another delusion or another attachment. So rather than just promoting positive thinking as an end in itself or a cure for all problems, the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindful awareness and then wise reflection. And if you read the suttas and you listen to his words, a lot of the time the Buddha is teaching people to reflect on their experience and look from different angles, and look at the pluses and the positive benefits of one course of action, for example, but also looking at the drawbacks. So like we've been discussing tonight, say with sensuality, good food. I mean, we all need to eat as human beings, so nutritious food, pleasant tasting food that makes it easier to eat, if we can find it without causing harm to others, then that's good. But then there's a drawback, there's a disadvantage as well, in that it can become addictive, and so we can end up eating too much. Even good food can become toxic, poisonous to us, or cause us health problems if we eat too much of it. So the Buddha taught us to reflect, say, on the food we consume, to know the right amount, to reflect on it and understand what it is. It's nutrition for the body rather than just a source of pleasure, say. So that's one example. So the Buddha was encouraging us to reflect on our actions, our state of mind, our intentions, what we're doing, and to look in a complete way, so that to see what is positive and useful, what is harmful, and what are the drawbacks and dangers of different things, different situations. So there will be times when positive thinking is very helpful to us. Where it tends to go wrong is when you become, caught up in maybe your desire, your greed, or your ambition for something, and they talk about the power of positive thinking, and say, "Yes, I'm going to get it." And of course, if you don't get what you want, then it's like, "Oh, what do I do now?" You've been stuck in a mode of positive thinking for a while. So I've got to get it, yes, yes, yes. And then if you don't get it, often people get very caught up in the feeling of failure or loss or disappointment and don't know how to deal with it. So the Buddha said, practice mindfulness and look at what you're involved with. So if it's back to the job, you've got to apply for a job. We'll try and look at what qualities you need to develop and prepare for your job application or to do that job. What knowledge, what skills, what characteristics you might have and maybe emphasize in your application for the job. And be positive, of course. There's no point thinking, I'm not going to get it, because then you probably won't do anything. So being too negative may stop you from doing something quite useful. But as you apply for your job and you're trying to do something with a positive attitude, you always have to keep a little bit of your mind open that I may not get it. It's not sure. I don't know what the outcome will be. So your positive thinking is modified or balanced with an awareness of impermanence, uncertainty. Then it won't become too much of a deluding force or lead on to too much disappointment. Some people get caught in the opposite, always just negative thinking, everything is wrong, only see the bad, always gloomy, always looking at the bad side of something and pointing out people's faults, seeing the faults in things, very critical, and they tend to become very depressed. So that's not going to work either. So what do? Well, you try to develop mindful awareness and reflect on the truth of the way things are. And as you do that, well, you become aware of what is positive, what is negative, those things that are good, those things that are not so good. So like, Ajahn Chah used to say, what we should do, say when a baby is born, everyone is positive. A new baby is born, it's a lovely experience, everyone's happy, excited, we have all kinds of celebrations. But he said you also have to remember when a baby's born, it means that baby is destined to to die. Because you can't have birth without death. But nobody remembers that. They're caught up in the positivity of the experience. And so as that continues through life, when death does come along, whenever, we often can't take it very well. We don't like death, we don't want the end of things. And how often that is revealed, that kind of attachment to the positive, to the wanting the good outcome, wanting things to go the way we like. That happens all the time, doesn't it? We build up expectations which are not met, or maybe we do get the thing we want. Maybe we get the job that we applied for and we're so happy and positive, but then it turns out, the job wasn't as good as I thought, or it's more difficult than I thought, or not, the workplace isn't so good as I thought. We have to be open to that side of things as well. Be aware that there are different sides of every experience. So you use positivity as a skillful means, but don't get deluded by it or just caught up in it. It's like mixing with people, isn't it? You mix with people generally we try to have a good attitude to the people we meet. You know, say you meet a new person, you're friendly, you mean well with them, and that's good, and that's probably the correct way to start off a relationship. But you also have to be ready. That person may turn out to be someone with a totally different worldview than you. And after a while you realize, we're totally unmatched. We can't work together or cooperate very well. We couldn't live together, couldn't be partners, we couldn't be friends because we are totally different. Or it could work the other way around. You may start off meeting someone and you're friendly, you're positive to that person, and you look at them and you think, wow, this person, they look like trouble, or we're not going to agree on anything, this isn't going to work. But then maybe you're happily surprised as well. It can work both ways. But if you only have one expectation, this person, they've got to be my friend, this has got to work, then you may easily be disappointed if it doesn't turn out how you were hoping. So use positive thinking skillfully, but don't get lost in it or caught up in it, because it can lead you to all kinds of trouble. Wasn't there a question about Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism? Oh, didn't get onto the sheet. There was a last question about the terms Mahayana Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. Especially for people new to Buddhism, they often hear these terms and they're not sure what they refer to or what the difference is. And this is a huge question because it's, you can answer in there's so many different aspects to it. The historical spread and growth of Buddhism, some of the different doctrinal teachings that you find in the two different types of Buddhism. But just briefly, when the Buddha died, he left a whole sangha of monks and nuns and community of lay followers. And it's perhaps not surprising the way human beings are, and these human beings weren't all enlightened, some were, many weren't. Everyone has their different view, their different take on things, different emphasis in the way they practice. Just as you see today, if you become interested in Buddhism, there's hundreds of different teachers and books and methods, and people will emphasize different aspects of the practice. So that quickly started to emerge after the Buddha's death. His initial teachings that he gave were remembered and passed down initially just orally. Later they were written down after a few hundred years. But they still gave room for interpretation and emphasis in the different monks, nuns, lay people who are practicing and teaching. So quite quickly you got different, what you might call sects, arising, like you do see in the world. People with their particular emphasis in the practice group together and form one sect or school. So this took place after the Buddha passed away. And then another factor in the development of Buddhism over the centuries is you get the geographical spread of Buddhist teachings through northern India, and then some of the monks came wandering down south to southern India, some went north. They couldn't really go directly over the Himalayas. They're like a huge kind of mass at the top of northern India, but they could go round the Himalayas. So Buddhism started to spread into what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, even to Iran, and then northwards through to eventually what became China, Tibet. So as Buddhism was spreading, these different sects, depending on where they went and the people who practiced them, how strong their faith and their practice was, well, some of those sects faded away very quickly, and some stayed, and some morphed or developed as time went by and as Buddhism spread. So Theravada Buddhism, this term you brought up, is the kind of Buddhism you find now, particularly in southern, or a little bit in southern India, but Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. And Theravada literally means the way of the elders. And it's the tradition that came from the time of the Buddha, the Vinaya, the discipline, the monastic discipline and training hasn't really changed very much since the time of the Buddha. It's a more conservative tradition where the practitioners try to preserve the Buddha's teachings in the suttas and the Vinaya, the teachings and the discipline, as best they can in an unchanged, unadulterated way, meaning the Theravada tradition that has come down, spread down from northern India to southern India to Sri Lanka and across to Southeast Asia. One of the main features is this emphasis on preserving the word of the Buddha, how things were practiced in the time of the Buddha. So it's called the way of the elders. And there is a continuity you can see in the kind of Buddhism practiced in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and even to this monastery. There's many things in common. Use this similar set of suttas and similar texts on the Vinaya. So traveling into these different countries as a Buddhist, you'll find many similarities between the countries, even though that culturally, linguistically, there may be differences, but the way of practice and the texts that are relied on in the practices, the way of meditation, you'll find quite a lot of continuity. That goes all the way back to the time of the Buddha. Mahayana Buddhism really refers to the school of Buddhism that evolved and developed as Buddhism and Buddhist monks travelled north from India, around the Himalayas, going round to Afghanistan, Pakistan, round to China and Tibet, and then on to other countries, even like Korea, Japan. So it's not surprising that just culturally, geographically, there'll be differences as Buddhism spreads out from northern India, encountering different local conditions, so different languages, different religions that are pre-existing, different customs and so on. And the school of what we call Mahayana Buddhism, which is really an umbrella term for quite a few other smaller branches or sects within Mahayana Buddhism, that was this kind of Buddhism that moved to the north around the Himalayas to China. So it's coming from the same Buddha, the same initial core teachings, and the texts that you'll find in those Buddhist countries have many similarities to what you find in the Theravada tradition, which is more to the south. But there were some, as far as I know, some additional texts were introduced, and some changes came about in some of the practices, particularly the monastic discipline. Even though the initial texts were based on the same texts as the Theravada tradition, the actual practices in the monasteries, particularly in China, varied a bit, because one thing that affects the practice of Buddhism often is the leadership of the country it's in. So like Buddhism was preserved, say, in Sri Lanka when it moved across from India to Sri Lanka, because the kings became Buddhist, and often the king is the protector of the religion, so that helps to preserve, just as in, say, Thailand today. Even today the king is Buddhist. So if you've got the leaders, the government, the kings protecting Buddhism, that's a great source of strength. So even in China, the emperors became Buddhist and the leaders of the country became Buddhist. But culturally, there were some differences there, and over time, Buddhist monasteries became very wealthy, well supported, but one of the practices that was kind of lost in China was the practice of what we call bindabata, monks going out, receiving alms in the villages. Gradually the monasteries became very wealthy with a lot of land, and the monks became insular in the sense they were tended to practice within the monasteries and even became farmers, growing food and cooking food. So over time, some of the monastic practices, some of the texts were added to and changed a little bit as Buddhism went further north. And another aspect of the teachings that varies, or you find the variations between Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism, is particularly the arising different views on what a Buddha is, what an arahant is. And the goal of Buddhism is always the liberation from suffering. So the first person to be liberated is the Buddha. He's self-liberated, self-awakened, self-taught. But then there's the disciples, enlightened disciples of the Buddha, what we call salvakas or arahants. And some variation has occurred in the way these are viewed between Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. Sometimes you hear talk in Mahayana Buddhism of arahants going on to practice to become Buddhas, or talk of everyone should become a Buddha, and you hear about what we call the Bodhisattva ideal, the ideal that we should all practice to save all beings, develop our barami, our spiritual qualities to the point where we all become Buddhas and save every other being. Whereas the Theravada practice, the flavour of that tends to more emphasize practicing to remove suffering and its causes here and now in this very lifetime. Which doesn't mean to say that Theravada Buddhism lacks people who are practicing, developing a lot of compassion and helping others, but it's a matter of emphasis in the texts. So this is a huge subject, so I probably can't go into it tonight, but it's basically the kind of Buddhism you find in these northern countries, differing from the kind of Buddhism and the texts and the teachings you find in the southern countries of South Asia, Southeast Asia. If you want to simplify it right down, we often talk about somebody practicing to liberate themselves from suffering in the here and now. We say to practice to become an arahant, one who has extinguished all suffering from their mind. And then you'll meet other practitioners who say they're practicing as a bodhisattva, they're aiming to become a Buddha, which means probably that they'll have to be born and reborn for many lifetimes to build their barami, the qualities of their practice to the point where they become a Buddha at some distant point in the future. So quite often monks will sort of discuss this. So I remember one time we were at a funeral in China, in Thailand. It was Lumpur Tate's funeral. Lumpur Tate was a famous arahant, disciple of Lumpur Man. And after the funeral, we stayed the night at the monastery. We had the opportunity to go and look after two elderly monks who, in our forest tradition, both were considered enlightened monks. One was called Lumpur Rian, one was called Lumpur Luang. You might not know these names, but these were considered arahants, and they were in a room resting. It was about midnight, so a group of us young monks went in and we were just looking after them, making them some tea, giving them a foot massage, and just listening to what they had to say. And at one point in their conversation, they were joking to each other about another monk that they knew, another friend of theirs, and they're all good friends, but they were joking about this other monk. They're saying, "Oh, I'm getting old now, my body is old." These monks were in their 70s or 80s. They say, "Oh, my joints hurt, my back hurts, everything hurts when you get old." They're just talking about some of the suffering of old age, but they were chuckling as they did this, so they didn't seem to really be suffering. But they were just pointing out, your body gets weak and old. And one of them said to the other, "Yeah, I'm just going to take Nibbana because this human body it's hopeless. It's a lost cause. I'm not going to put any more faith in the human body because it only brings you pain and suffering as you get older. So I put all my faith in Nibbana, liberation from suffering." And the other monk agreed. He said, "Yeah," talking to us, the young monks, he said, "You just put all your faith in the practice for Nibbana, liberating your mind from suffering in the here and now, because your body is only going to disappoint you as it gets older. And don't be like that monk." And they talked about their friend, another monk, who wasn't in the room, but they were just chuckling together about this other monk. They said, "Oh, he's practicing the Bodhisattva path. He's got to deal with his old painful body, not only this life, but he's going to have to do it again and again and again till he becomes a Buddha. Oh, it's so tiring, even just thinking about it, being a Bodhisattva, so many lives, very tiring to build your barami, to help all sentient beings be free from suffering. It's a great idea, but he's going to get so tired doing that. I really feel sorry for him. He should just take Nibbana in the here and now." So this is how two arahants talk about a bodhisattva. They have compassion and friendliness, but they were also pointing out a lot of suffering following the bodhisattva path. So maybe I'll end tonight's Q&A on that one. As I said, it's a huge subject, the difference between Mahayana and Theravada, and it's not that one is better than the other or anything like that, but there are some different emphasis and particularly some differences have occurred as Buddhism has spread around the world.